Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's Coach's Corner. Wanted to say a quick happy Thanksgiving to all of our American members who were celebrating yesterday. And, we know it's Black Friday today, so always a fun day for most people when they're online shopping. So if you're tuning in live, I want to say thank you and also a great big welcome to the newest members of our group. We're super excited that you're here and wanting to make a change within your health. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Penny Houghton. I'm a holistic health and mindset coach. And together with Coach Lisa, we found this group and we are co-owners of Lux Life Coaching. So my side of things, what I always talk about is the mindset behind why we do what we do. And I know it's always difficult for people because they don't even know what kinds of questions to ask about their mindset and the mental health around that. So I wanted to talk today about patterns, behaviors, and how we get stuck in a loop when we are finding that. So, the question really is why you have so much awareness around the patterns that we do, or habits. You can interchange the word patterns, habits, programming with whatever, but then why we still can't break them. So, I want to talk about what happens and what's going on. Yes, I have my notes, so I'm just putting my everything up here because it's really an important topic, and I know we talk about this a lot. Coach Lisa and I discuss this at nauseum actually about habits, and I know for women and men it gets very difficult because we see this loop where it's like I'm doing something really great for my health. I want to make a change, but now I'm like stuck in it and I can't get out. So I automatically fall back into old behaviors, which then takes us back to where we were. Now, I've been a fault of this. I still sometimes do it and have to catch myself. So I have some things and tips and tricks. They're not tricks, they're techniques actually, in order to help you move forward and break the loops. But first, we need to understand where they come from and how they effectively are linked in to who we are in our subconscious. So when we are stuck in this loop, repeating the same actions, despite wanting to change, you're really not alone in that. Like, it's that feeling of being trapped in these cycles can be so frustrating, and there's a reason behind it. So, it always comes down to the mind body connection. And I talk about this a lot when in all of my other videos, mindset, big trauma, like traumas, big traumas, small traumas. And I mentioned the word trauma or mental health and everybody's like, I'm fine. And if you saw the reel that Lisa and I put up about being in the I'm fine coma, it's because everybody's is, right? So instead of like taking a look, everybody's like, no, I'm fine. Because you don't, and there's that's a pattern in itself. Okay, so I want to discuss that as well. When you're constantly like ignoring the obvious, that's a pattern. When we are looking at the behaviors that are associated with abandonment or isolation, neglect, those are things and patterns that have been in the body, and it comes in an awareness from the birth. So if you've had a childhood, preteen, that sort of thing, these are things that are programmed in us from the time, like just the way it is. So it's nothing, it's not like I don't want to look at it as, oh, my parents neglected me. Like, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about generationally. If our parents, if your parents are boomers like mine were, they were busy. They didn't have time. I was a latchkey kid. I knew how to make my own dinner, do the laundry, do all the things by the time I was like 8 years old. That's just the way it was. Now, does it mean that it's like it can't change and that's like perfect? No. Okay, this just is. So when we look and talk about traumas, there's things that are in our makeup and in our programming that actually react as a trauma in the body. So it pushes us into fight or flight, which pushes us our hormone levels high, which pushes the cortisol levels high, which creates midsection body fat. It's, like we lose our appetite, we have low energy, we don't sleep at night, like all of these things that are systematic. You also have to look at, do you have like hair, is your hair thinning? Are your nails brittle? Do you have like dry skin on the heels and, in your hands? Are your elbows rough? Like these are all things that like go on, right? And everybody's just like, oh, I don't have trauma. Your body knows. So I want to talk about first the mind body connection as the body remembers. So any trauma or chronic stress will leave this lasting imprint on our nervous system in the areas of the brain, most likely like the amygdala, which manages our fear and survival. So that fight or flight. There's like a course that I took at Berkeley. It was online. Why zebras have no stress, right? And that was the name of the course. But what they're talking about is your stress level is supposed to go up if you get attacked, and then it drops back down. But unfortunately, we live in a society where our stress is constantly high. There is no coming back down. So we live in this fight or flight stress mode, which creates, and I talked about this, autoimmune disease and autoimmune issues. I talked about this in my last live video about why women have most of the autoimmune diseases. So anything related to the gut, anything related to the like arthritises, or anything like type 2 diabetes, all of these things, COPD, asthma, these are autoimmune, right? So when we look at the way our body remembers the stressors, it's the way our brain is sending out the signals. So even if you're aware of the patterns, trying to make them change with logic, not going to work. It's just really not enough. And I've seen this time and again with our clients that if you're not putting the emotional connection to that, it's very difficult to talk your way out of a habit. Okay, so for those of you who have tried time and again to change your behaviors without doing all the mindset work, you will notice, and Coach Lisa and I notice, that people fall back into old habits because they haven't made the connection. So when we look at our bodies store emotions and experiences deep within, so often influencing us in ways that go against our conscious goals. Okay, so there's a vast difference, and I teach this all the time with our clients and clients over the last decade of like, you need to make that connection between the subconscious behavior, our programming, our patterns, our habits, and the conscious desires. Okay, so why do we repeat? So the thinking part of our brain can only do so much with dealing with automatic body-driven responses. Okay, so but there's good news to that. So we can break these cycles by working directly with our nervous system. So how do we do that? Understanding that the connection between the vagus nerve and our brain, it's connecting our brain to our gut, right? So Coach Lisa talks about gut health all the time. She talks about like hydration, sleep, protein, all of those things that everybody's like, oh yeah, I know that, it's so easy. Okay, so we say this all the time. Everything we teach may be simple, but it's not easy. Because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it currently. Okay, so when we look at having to make that change from like with the breaks in the nervous system and able to break the loops, break the patterns, break the habits, whatever way you want to call it, it's all the same thing. We have to tap into our body's wisdom. And this is where I talk about all the time. Your body hangs on to stuff. Your body knows. The body stores the emotions, the energy, and everything else. Because in reality, our whole entity is energy. We are not just like, bones and skin and blood. We're an energy force. Everything on this planet is made up of energy. So if your energy is off and you're out of alignment with what you think you want to do and what your body knows what to do for survival mode, then that makes a massive difference. So our bodies can hold or release stored tension, old wounds, making way for real transformation. So some of the things that we want to look at, and this is why we put it in our programming all the time when we're teaching our clients, are things like, I'm going to say it. Every time I say this, I feel like everybody watching this rolls their eyes. Journaling, okay? That's one. The reason why journaling is so good is it helps you move from surface level thought processes into deeper. Okay, so how do we do that? We start with journaling if, okay, so let's take an example of like a week. And I say to a client, I want you to journal every day for a week. And then they come back to me in a week and like, I didn't have anything to journal. Okay, great. So I feel that sometimes we don't teach people how to journal and we don't teach people how to meditate. So I want to do that today so that you guys have a clearer understanding of how you can use these techniques in order to help yourself. So when we look at journaling, it's one of those getting into the habit of opening up your journal and writing out, okay, what am I feeling today? You may have something to add, or you may not. So if you're sitting there after 5 minutes and you have nothing to write, close your book, move on. Next day, how am I feeling today? What's coming up for me? What were my reactions? Maybe you had an angry moment. Maybe you had like something that was like happy that you want to write about. Then you write about it. Okay? The following day, open up your journal. How am I feeling today? You've got nothing. And after 3 minutes, you're still sitting there blank. Close your journal. That's how this works, right? Like, it's not like all of a sudden you buy a journal and you know what to put in it. And majority of the time, I've said this to clients and I've said this in a video before, majority of the time, most people are going to lie inside their journals. Why? Because subconsciously you're afraid that somebody's going to find your journal, read it out loud, and then so you're not going to be honest. So you're afraid of what people are going to read inside of your journal. Now, it's one of those things that we come across time and again, and everybody's like, oh, I'm not afraid, I can write anything. But nobody does. Like, getting real about your emotions inside your journal is where you want to get to in order to make a change. So one of the other things that we want to look at is, in order to make that connection with the mind and the body, is your meditation. And again, same ideas apply. You're not going to all of a sudden get into this like Buddha style meditation where you're like umming all over for like an hour and everything's peaceful and I'm so good and look at me be a meditator. No, that never works. It took me years and years and years to figure out how to meditate properly, because in the beginning I would have 7,000 thoughts a minute coming into my head and I'd be like, I'm supposed to be sitting here mindless. That's not true. Okay, so ideally you're going to just sit for like a couple of minutes. Let the thoughts come in and let them go out. Let them come in, let them go out. Now the problem is most people want to hang on to every thought and analyze it. You don't need to. This is where we get people overthinking, creating stories for themselves, because our brains are tricky. Our brains are gonna tell us what we want to hear opposed to what's really happening. So if you're going over a situation, say something happened at work or with a spouse or with a friend, and like you've got this narrative in your head and you start meditating on it and you keep telling yourself the same thing over and over, because your brain's like, your brain's going to be like, oh, this is easy, I don't have to work, so great, I'm going to tell her this story. None of it's real. Okay, so that thought, when you're meditating, let it come in, clear it, move, let the next one come in, because you're going to be bombarded with actual thoughts that are coming in and going out. And in order to regulate your nervous system, to release the bonds and the habits, you have to be able to release what is coming in and going out as just a thought. Don't have to ponder it, don't have to look at it, just move it through. Okay, so the other thing, and I want to give you a third, there's multiple, but I'm going to stop at the third one, is your setting of intentions. Okay, so the reason why we want to set the intention is every day when it helps best when you're like, as you're falling asleep, then think about what your intention is for the next day. And just let what that is. One intention, two, maybe three intentions. I wouldn't go beyond that. It gets to be too difficult. People are like, oh, I'm setting all the intentions. Great, but you're setting yourself up for failure. So we want to set ourselves up for success. So if your intention is, I do this all the time, I write out every night. My intention is to get up and track my food. My intention is to make good choices. My intention is, to work on my gratitude. And then in the morning, track my food, and I write out what my three intentions are. And then I repeat them throughout the day. If I feel myself falling backward, I sit there and go, my intentions were to make good choices. Okay? So it's a reminder. And when we set our intentions, it's not like just put it on the piece of paper and forget it. It's a mantra that you can have throughout the day. If you find yourself falling into that trap of, oh, it's 2 o'clock, I have to have a coffee with like some sugar or a chocolate bar, or, I'm tired at 7 o'clock at night and I just need a glass of wine, but your intention is not to have the glass of wine, you have to remind yourself about your intentions. You have to be putting them out there all day, every day. What's happening and what we want to work on is moving from the conscious thought to the unconscious. And that's where the change happens. So until you actually allow your subconscious to feel safe and provided for, secure, all of the things, the patterns you're trying to break are going to not. So if you're just consciously aware of what this is, like I'm going to stop whatever, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, but you don't put a date to it. That's, a dream, not a goal. I just want to be healthier. That's not specific. Coach Lisa and I talk about setting goals. You have to, when you set a goal, whether you call it goal, manifesting, whatever you want to call it, if it doesn't have actual, clear, defined details and a plan of action with a date, they're not going to happen, because then it's just out there. There's no way for the universe to push all the things toward you if you're loosey goosey and I don't know what I want, but I just want to be healthier. Okay, so we get our clients to define what healthier means to them, because it means something different to every single person. Okay, so when we're looking to make lasting change, we also have to allow the emotions that come out with our journaling, with our meditation, and with setting intentions. So if you're not attaching the emotional aspects of those, anytime you're trying to change a pattern, behavior, habit, whatever you want to call it, is not going to stick. Okay, so we have this, we're coming up, obviously into December, which leads us into January, which leads into the New Year's resolutions. Personally, I don't believe in them. I feel anybody who makes a New Year's resolution, and have watched this over the past 27 years in fitness, anybody who makes the resolutions and starts January 1, they're out by March 15th. Every single one. If you start prior, that's usually a better goal. That's usually where the success comes in, because you're starting prior to January. So if any of you are looking to make those changes, you guys know that we have our DIY program. That's our Unstuck Light membership, which is you get an extra 6 months if you're signing up before the end of the year, December 31st. And we do that on purpose, because for the people who really want to make a change are going to sign up and get started before January 1. Okay, so if you're really looking to make a change in 2025 and see results, permanent results, then that's the course of action. So when we look at, I want to come back to recognizing what the emotional connections are. So if you're holding on to past hurts, angers, whatever negative, low vibration emotion that you're holding on to, and not addressing why or the how we're feeling that, then those emotions are going to stay in the body, and that's going to make it harder for your subconscious to feel safe enough for you to make a change. Okay, so for an example, if you're holding on to something that happened like 15, 20 years ago and it still has anger in there or disappointment, hurt, defeat, any one of those, and you're feeling like lost about it and you're not addressing that, then any kind of physical change that you're trying to make, any habit change with your water, food, exercise, sleep, is never going to stay permanently because you haven't addressed what's going on underneath that. So think of like the physical stuff and the habits that you're trying to change as the blanket on the bed, and the emotional stuff is the foundation and the mattress. So if you're not don't have a good solid foundation and a good mattress, then it doesn't really, you're not getting a good night's sleep. So it doesn't matter how comfy that blanket is, you're going to be uncomfortable rolling around on a lumpy mattress, right? So when we look at how this can benefit you, moving through the emotional connections, the hurts, the disappointments, neglectful feelings, avoidance, any one of those things, there's quite a list. There's a very long list, actually. So this is where we want to make that change and break the cycles of the patterns that we have. And majority of the time, our patterns are set from birth. If you look at what your patterns and your belief systems are, they're usually set by your parents, grandparents, great grandparents. So if you start looking at like, why do I do what I do? You want to look around you to see what your family does as well. And that'll give you a clear indication of like what you're dealing with in order to make that change. Guys, that is me for today for Coach's Corner. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you're watching the replay, please put #replay. And if you have any questions, obviously post them below. But I want to add one question. What do you do in order to manage your emotions? Is it journaling? Is it mindfulness? Or